Welcome to the Saddleback College Emeritus Institute Dorothy Marie Lowry Distinguished Guest Lecture Series, recorded in spring 2020. Thanks also to our faculty moderator, Mrs. Laura Hoffman. For more information regarding the Emeritus Institute, please visit our website at www.saddleback.edu/emeritus.
Today, I'm pleased to introduce the fine artist, photographer Rick Graves' impossibly long images of cars racing, waves crashing, people socializing, look like they couldn't have been made without the use of software. However, his images are rooted in film, taking inspiration from a centuries-old technique called slit scan photography. And this was historically used to determine the winner of horse races. Armed with a Hasselblad camera and a head full of math formulas, Rick experimented with how to continuously move film through a camera at a specific speed. His Distortion images essentially document the passage of time, whether he is showing the last few seconds of a car race or a few minutes of a colorful Mardi Gras parade. Graves' Distortion work has taken him to Moscow, Hawaii, Japan, Paris, and beyond, and produced some unique documentation of NASCAR races, triathlons, dog shows, the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, sailboats, just to name a few. And when it comes to printing and displaying Distortion images, the sky's the limit. Rick Graves' photos have been licensed by NASCAR, printed onto belts, and blown up to wrap around entire buildings. Rick is also a longtime exhibitor at Laguna Beach's acclaimed Festival of the Arts, where you can witness his creations firsthand in the summer. And I'm pleased to bring you Rick Graves.
Okay, well, good morning, Laura and Dan. Thank you so much for inviting me to share my story about Distortion with everyone from the Emeritus Institute. So Distortion is what I call long format imaging, and its basis is in linear photography, slit scan photography, strip photography. It's got kind of some generic names, but basically what I've done is just built my own camera system that allows me to move film through the camera. Yes, I did say that, film through the camera, so it's all analog based, and the film is always moving. So whether I'm shooting bicycles or race cars, the film is moving through the camera. Or if I'm shooting, say, landscapes, the film is always moving through the camera. And I'll hope to explain this to you so that you understand it through this presentation. So it all started when someone challenged me, and nothing really gets me going more than a good challenge. So I was working on a car brochure project for David Stokes, Mazda creative director, and he, in a meeting, just kind of came out with this random challenge and said, show me something new and different that I've never seen before, Rick. And so I thought about that and I said, okay, let me get back on that. And so I remembered years ago reading that there's very few new things in the world. What you want to do is look for something old and do something new with it. So that was kind of my starting point. And I remembered this old technique that I thought might work, and I'm always looking for a way to have my own unique voice in everything that I do. So I'm always trying to think out of the box. And so my approach is as an artist, as a photographer, I'm always trying to innovate and use my past and my skills to do something that no one else has done. So what I did is I came up with this idea to create this camera, but along that road, there's quite a few things that happened to get there. So let me play a video for you. A friend of mine was making a video series that he was working on for Adidas called Artists, Athletes, and Innovators. And so he asked me if I would be the subject of his video. And so what I agreed. I've always had trouble kind of with the artist label. I don't really ever think of myself as an artist, although I guess. Athlete for sure. Innovator, absolutely. But the thing that I really pride myself on the most is being a problem solver. There really is no problem that's beyond me being able to solve. So here's the video, I'll show you. It's impossible for me not to step up and just lead the charge. Is that passion? Is it arrogance? I don't know. The bigger the challenge, the more it brings out of me. It's a good day when you break a camera, because if you're not putting a little risk out there, I mean, then you're not trying hard enough. I had a little SL70 Honda, and stupidly I was kind of showing off and leading the charge, kept in the throttle, blasted across a road. I don't remember much after that. That was a formative event for me. Being able to survive that made me think, why didn't I die and why am I here? Learning that taking risks is something to be done with intelligence. Tomorrow is not guaranteed us. You only have today, so grab every little bit of it that you can get. And a creative director challenged me one day and said, show me something new and different I've never seen before. And I remembered that there's very few new things in the world. Look for something old and do something new with it. The concept of a finish line camera really became the starting point for a kind of a lifelong journey that I've been on ever since getting interested in Neil Leifer's work. He shot motion in a way that really resonated with me. There was a published book that featured quite a bit of his what was called strip camera work at the time. That was a type of photography that was based on capturing motion, which is what I was all about. It was kind of an alignment of opportunities that I felt I needed to pursue. Game on at that point. I mean, my journey is still going with that camera system.
I spotted you with your tripod and your battery pack. I could figure out what you were doing just watching you shoot. And I was blown away when I saw your strip of film, because I realized how far this technique has come.
Many people through the years have tried to make something out of this work, and no one yet has really done it. It's going to really take some very creative, very adventurous mavericks that can think outside the box. Okay, we're back. So the way that I got into photography is kind of funny. I had moved to Huntington Beach, and I had been a motorcycle rider, a tennis player, and a skier all my life since I was little. And I moved downtown Huntington Beach, going to Huntington High School, and everyone was surfing, and I had never surfed. So I was trying to learn how to surf, and I'll tell you, it's one of the hardest sports to learn. And I just wasn't able to fit into the crowd, but suddenly there was an opportunity to shoot some pictures of these guys in a surf contest. And after the surf contest was over and people had seen me shooting their pictures, all of a sudden everyone's paying attention to me and I'm like their best new friend. And so I thought, okay, well, I can't be as good a surfer and fit in the crowd that way. So this is my way to fit in. I'll be the photographer to the surfers. So I ended up, shooting a lot of surf pictures and building water housings and having a lot of fun shooting surfing and motion. And then I had the opportunity to go to Art Center, which was a turning point in my life. That was the best experience ever, going to Art Center. I commuted 6 days a week from Huntington Beach. I drove to Pasadena every day. Usually there from, I left my house at 7 a.m. and I'd get back home at 11 p.m. 6 days a week. And then I got out of school, graduated school, and really turned to motorsports again as sort of my passion. And so racing motorcycles, I went into shooting motorcycles for brochures and advertising, and got into cars, shooting cars, and again, really challenging imagery. Like this image, the camera is all actually attached on a pivoting arm that came down while we were flying through the air. And I would shoot a motor-driven camera in a water housing. And just before we'd land, I'd release the button. It would pull the camera up in the air so that it wouldn't crash into the ground. Well, I did. I destroyed a camera that day, but we were able to change out the camera, get another one in, with the light got perfect, and I got the shot. So that's what I mean when I say, if you're not destroying a camera, or if you're not, putting your cameras or taking a little bit of intelligent risk, then I think you're not trying hard enough. So that's kind of been my motto. So I became, kind of specialized in shooting race cars, really big passion of mine, racing. This was in Austria at the Formula One racetrack. So now we're going to talk in detail about the challenge going back to the creative director. So after he challenged me, I was thinking, okay, what am I going to do? What's new and different that someone's never seen before? And I remembered back in 1980, I believe, after getting out of Orange Coast College, where I went to school for my initial photography education, I had worked at a camera store, and I had tested this linear filter, is what it was called. It was made by Koken Filter Company, and it said to put the filter, this slit filter, onto your camera's lens, cover the lens with your with filter. And then it said to advance a roll of film through the camera, not allowing any light to hit the film. So run the roll of film without any light hitting it, and then you push the rewind button, and then you point the camera at some traffic, a busy roadway. Open the shutter and rewind the film back into the film canister, and now the light is hitting the film. And I shot 2 rolls of film, and I looked at them and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. And then I put that away for, must have been 20 years that I never thought about this technique until the gentleman challenged me, show him something new and different. So I went and shot a test with that linear filter, and he loved it. So what I did is I had to now make a mechanized system, a repeatable, reliable mechanized system that I could do this professionally, because he wanted to use this technique in one of the photos that we're doing for a car brochure. So with the help of my father, who is an aerospace engineer, he and I got together, we started conceptualizing, designing the camera, and a huge part of this technique is math. So the math formulas he was instrumental in helping me write. And then my assistant that I had, Stephen Mueller at the time, he helped me with the day in and day out sort of development of the camera, milling, parts and really just testing, doing the electronics. I got together with robotics engineers and motor companies. And finally, we started to sort of sneak up on a camera system that worked. And so here's what we ended up with. And I call it a Distacam. So because it's so based in the distance and the speed, I just needed to call it something. So I trademarked the name Distacam and Distavision. And so you can see the camera that this is the current camera system that I use. And over my shoulder, you'll see the earlier version that was twice as big and twice as heavy. This one is about 12 inches tall by 7 inches wide. And notice the battery. It's 18 AA batteries that are put together in plastic tubes. I think they're irrigation sprinkler tubes. And so it's 18 AA batteries in a series. So again, we go back to this technique to the photo finish camera. It's more than 100 years old, this technique. It was used to document the finish of horse races. As horse racing became such big money, they couldn't just have someone at the finish line. They had 3 stewards at the finish line trying to make sure that 3 people knew who crossed the finish line. Well, there was a gentleman that his name is Lorenzo Del Riccio. And in 1937, he developed the first finish line camera. And then it was tested, ironically, at the Del Mar racetrack. And this is the Del Mar racetrack. This is my version of a photo finish. So unlike a regular camera that goes click, this camera system that we're talking about is it's got a slit. So the slit is covering the film, and as the horses run through the frame, the light passes through the vertical slit and records whatever goes through that slit. And now my job is to determine, predetermine the speed of the horses with the radar gun is what I used. And I measure the distance with a laser rangefinder. And then with the distance and the speed, I calculate with math formulas how fast to make the motor spin that is moving the film continuously through the camera. So an entire 66-inch roll of film is going through the camera during this exposure. And these horses, I believe, were going about, let's say roughly 30 miles an hour. And I believe the roll of film, 66 inches of film went through the camera in probably about 5 seconds. But my camera system is pretty amazing. A roll of film can go through in 1 second or as slow as 15 minutes. So look at the bottom image and look at the striping across the background and look at what caused that striping. It's the vertical pole. They call it the 16th mile pole. So that tells the horse racers that there's a 16th of a mile to go. And so I pointed the camera with the slit. I know exactly where the slit is, so I know what's going to be dragged across the entire roll of film. So the only thing through the slit that the film can see is that black and white pole. And so you see the horses running through that slit, that point where the light is passing through the slit, and that information is being dragged across the entire roll of film. So here again is my Hasselblad camera with the regular shutter. And then now you'll see the slit. It's a Hasselblad dark slide with the water jet slit cut into the dark slide. And that's how I use this camera. And yeah, I shoot film, and it's hard to get film. This film is not made anymore. So I have to scour eBay to find film, and it's gotten to be very expensive. It's kind of, people say it's rare, it's out of date film. So take a look at I've got about 1,000 rolls of film, and look at the expiration date here at the top. So some of these rolls of film expired in 2001. So my film is a finite resource that will not be there forever, and nor will the film processing. It's hard to get film processed these days. So the kit that I carry around is full of quite a bit of equipment. I need a measuring tape or a laser rangefinder to determine the distance. Well, sometimes I can't use the laser rangefinder or a measuring tape, so I just have to take a guess. For the speed of my subject, I will sometimes use like if I'm walking, or if I'm able to, I'll use this GPS wristwatch to determine the correct speed, or what the speed is of my subject is moving at, or I'll use a radar gun. And the exposure is basically determined with a light meter, good old light meter, and that's to set my aperture, because there is no shutter. The shutter is really not working at all in this camera system. The shutter is the vertical slit, and so my aperture, I have to control. That is my only way of controlling how much light is going to reach the film. So here's my math formulas that I did in Excel program with the help of my father. And so basically there is a different math formula for every lens I put on the camera. So you see here, there are, here I'll go into my laser pointer. So you'll see the lenses here are all, each one has a different math formula, and I have to measure the distance, and I put that into the lens that I'm using, 45 feet, and that gives me the next opportunity to put in the miles per hour, 7.5. And so with that, it puts out a RPM speed, and that I'm able to do right here. And then I put the key is just basically what I put into the camera. So this is, then what I did is I decided that the way that I was going to test this camera is I'm going to go to Europe, and I'm going to capture the best shot that I can of Lance Armstrong winning his 6th Tour de France in a row. And so I flew to France, and I followed the Tour de France for the final 3 days, knowing that the last day was going to be my really best opportunity on the Champs-Élysées, where they do 7 laps. So now I'm going to get 7 opportunities to shoot one roll as the group passes by, shoot a roll. Then I get a radar gun reading the next time by, and I shoot a roll. I get a new radar gun reading as they come by, and I shoot a new roll. So each time I'm updating my information of the speed. Now the distance, I have no way to control. This is a road. They could go near me, far from me. I just measured to the middle of the road. I got there at 4 in the morning, and the bikes weren't due to get to the Champs-Élysées till 4 in the afternoon. I was there 12 hours waiting. Front row, I set up at 4 in the morning with my tripod, and they came through and said I needed a ticket, and they were kicking me out. And luckily enough, I was able to get someone to loan me their ticket, so I was able to stay and get the shot. So here I am in different locations using the camera to shoot in different ways. So in the top left, you see me rolling the camera on a dolly, and I've got tubes, 10-foot tubes. And then to the right of that, I'm actually using the bicycle and the cart to just smoothly walk the camera through Central Park. Camera is basically always on a tripod. You see me shooting the Tour of California, shooting at NASCAR, and the bottom right, I'm shooting from a boat in Chicago on the Architectural River Tour. So this is a really interesting image where you'll see that I am moving the camera on a dolly. And basically, I figure out with my GPS wristwatch how fast I'm able to move the dolly on the 10-foot rail of tubing. And then I've got skateboard wheels. I made this little skateboard dolly. And so the camera's real smooth, but it's only rolling about 9 feet because I run out of tube at both ends. So you can see when I start the motor moving, look on the left, the far left, and the far right. You can see that the film is moving, but the background is stationary, so it's being blurred across until I start moving the dolly and the camera comes up to the correct speed, and then it gets very sharp at that given distance that I've measured to. And then at the end, I have to slow down and stop, and you see that's where the blur and the dragging of a stationary area is being blurred because the film is still moving until I turn off the camera. So this is an interesting one as well, where I'm moving the camera past a stationary subject. So the camera is used in 2 different ways. I can either move the camera past a stationary subject, or I have the camera stationary on a tripod as the moving subject goes through the frame. But the film is always, always moving through the camera at a given speed by me. So look at what's happening as I walk past these people sitting in Central Park, completely unaware that they're being photographed. So I'm walking the bicycle because you're not allowed to ride your bike on these walking paths in Central Park. I'm walking the bike, towing this little kid toddler cart with my camera attached to the back of the cart. And I was having trouble getting the camera to stay stationary and not tilt over. And so I finally figured it out. But I love in the image how the background is actually, you see it actually moving because it's further away, it's being stretched. And anything closer, you see in the foreground, some people walking, one person's walking in front of me between my chosen distance and the camera, you can see it's compressed. Someone with a baby stroller, it looks like. They're squished together. At the given distance that I measured to get my accurate sharpness, it's really sharp, and then further away, the information of the distance is being stretched. So I can only get sharpness at one distance, which is a really interesting aspect of this photography. So another interesting thing about this photography is that, so the scene is only being recorded, literally only a couple inches of the scene is being recorded through the slit, as you saw in my earlier example. So if you jump over where the slit is seeing, as in the top picture, everyone's in the air. No one is on the ground. So nobody's foot hit the ground and was stationary. So if something is stationary, it gets stretched or dragged, blurred across. So look in the bottom image where the guy's foot hit the ground, right where the slit was seeing, and his foot gets stretched across. And you'll see this in many, many of my images of people. So the top image is that one from the Architectural River Tour in Chicago. And all of those black verticals are going under bridges that are going over the camera. And I think that's kind of interesting looking. And then this one down lower is, this one here is Las Vegas Strip. Trying to drive a car along the Las Vegas Strip and get a continuous run was nearly impossible. And this bottom one here, that is San Francisco. Oh, let me get out of that. So cycling is one of my favorite things to shoot. The groups are great. They're all moving at almost the same speed. So I try and shoot the Tour of California every year, and these are some of my best-selling images. Racing, being one of my passions, is also a great thing to shoot. That top NASCAR image, 201 miles an hour. And so what I have to do is I have to figure out the speed the cars are going. And I use GPS, radar gun, you know, many different ways, measuring tape or a laser to figure out the distance. And so every single shot is a different calculation. This one down, the second one down is Long Beach Grand Prix. In fact, all three of those are Long Beach Grand Prix. So the top one here is Tokyo, walking, just going to busy places in Tokyo. And one of the things that I think this camera is amazing to work with is a people watching device. So what I love to do is point the camera into a busy crosswalk. So where people are walking across the street, and then you get traffic and you get people, and it's just such an interesting mix of motion and distance. And that's where some of the distortion that's inherent in this technique plays such an integral part in the final look and the artistic sort of element of it, because this camera system can be very literal. You can get a very literal sort of image, or you can get something that's very artistic. So these are all collaborations with the Festival of Arts in Laguna Beach and the Pageant of the Masters. So the Pageant of the Masters is a wonderful show that takes place in the summer where I exhibit art. And so an interesting sort of explanation of this is how it's done. So what I do is I assemble these people on an afternoon where they're just there so I can shoot their picture. And they're actually walking down past camera, circling back around, and they're making a circle. It's kind of an oblong circle. So you can see them in the background moving the opposite direction, but yet what's weird about it is it looks like they're going the same direction. So that's one of these anomalies about this camera system, that because the film is going, say, from right to left, everything that moves looks like it's going right to left, even though the blurry figures in the background are actually going left to right. So wrap your head around that one. That one's really boggled our minds for a long time. So the ocean is also one of my favorite things to shoot. It's one of the hardest things to shoot, because how do you measure the distance of a wave? Some waves are closer and further, and the ocean is constantly shifting. How fast is a wave going? It's one of the sort of conundrums that I still don't fully understand. I can give you a range, but I don't know what the actual speed is. So in order to shoot these, you know what? You just have to go and try. And I normally come away with something usable and pretty epic a lot of times. And sailboats, I still haven't gotten my best sailboat shot, but I want to keep working on that. So this is a very sort of distorted group of images. And so the reason that you get this distortion is I have to determine a speed that I'm going to make the film move for the entire roll. The speed doesn't change, it's constant. So I determine the speed of what the torso of your body is moving at, say 3 miles an hour, 4 miles an hour. The ballerinas, they're jumping, their feet and their arms are moving much faster and in different directions than their torso. So that's the distortion. The dachshunds, that's a fun one, because the lead dachshund, he stopped. He was walking through and stopped, and so his body gets stretched until he started moving again. And then the next dachshund, he's a little compressed because he was moving too fast. And then the third one, he's just right, nice and sharp and proportionally correct. USC marching band, I had these people doing the conga line, so lots of fun distortions there. And here's one of kind of a very literal look where everything moves constant. The distance is not changing. So speed at amusement ride at Knott's Berry Farm, the sugarcane train on the island of Maui, the Black Hills Railroad train in South Dakota. So a lot of people ask, do I do verticals? Verticals are kind of different. So I turn the camera instead of so that the film is going horizontally. Now I turn the camera so that it's going, the camera is vertical and the film is actually going vertical now. So the one on the left is a waterfall. Hard to kind of wrap your head around what you're seeing there, but that is a waterfall. I'm under the waterfall looking out, and that's what it looked like. It really surprised me. The next one over, that is a fountain, a water fountain that's shooting 50 feet into the air and then coming back down in its own position. So the water goes up and falls back down in its own position, you know, over itself, basically. A campfire. I wondered what would it look like if I shot fire? Because the flames are kind of leaping up and dancing. The next one, an escalator. What would it look like if people on the escalator were walking and some are just riding the escalator? So look at the guy that's being stretched because he's just riding the elevator. And I moved the film at the people that were walking down the escalator, so they were moving faster. So say the escalator is going 2 miles an hour. Well, the people walking down the escalator are going 2 miles an hour. So I set the camera to go 4 miles an hour. And so now the guy riding the escalator is only going 2 miles an hour. So he gets stretched out in the same exact area. You see a more proportionally correct sized person and a very stretched out person. The top one is from the Amtrak train. I'm riding on the Amtrak train going by Dana Point Wharf Pier at 50 miles an hour, pointing the camera through the window using my GPS wristwatch to determine how fast I'm going and a laser rangefinder to figure out my distance. The next one down is really one of my favorite images. The position 2 and 3 are both the same road in Bishop, California, and the same fence line. It's a slightly different place on the road. And so one's in the spring, one's in the winter. I wanted to get the same location in the winter with the snow, and I arrived there really early in the morning. It was dark. I set up my camera. I wanted to get first light, and there's that horse just grazing. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm waiting for the sun to come up. The sun just peaks the horizon. I do one run with the camera. I shot one roll of film, and the horse ran away to go eat. I think the rancher brought out some hay, and he took off. And basically, that shot was done with one roll. So now here are just an example of landscapes where I'm putting the camera in the car and I'm driving down the road. That's how I did the palm trees. That's in Laguna Niguel, California on Coast Highway. The sunflowers, again, I'm on tubing that I brought, and the 10-foot tubing didn't give me the distance I wanted, so I found some irrigation tubing that was about 20 feet long. So I put together a system where I could hold 2 rails of 20-foot tubing and run my little skateboard dolly across that 20 feet of tubing. And the bottom 2 are shot from a car, one in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee and the Valley of Fire near Las Vegas. So now I've built a body of work. Now what am I gonna do with these images? And so down in Laguna, there is the Festival of Arts. So I applied for the Festival of Arts. I did not get in my first year that I tried to get in. The next year, I was lucky enough to get into the show, and it's just been an amazing experience being there. 2008 was my first year exhibiting, and I've exhibited there. This will be my 13th year. Every year I've been there in the show, and it's a juried show, so it's not easy to stay in the show, not easy to get in the show, not easy to stay in the show. So each artist, most artists get a 16-foot wall, and you basically design your wall and put up your work, and you're there every night, and 2,000 people come to see the Pageant of the Masters, and it's just a great opportunity to share my work with the public and to sell a little art too. So here's another year. Every year I change the work, change my layout. Some years it's the same, but I change it a little bit. I met my lovely bride, Heather, at the festival 2 years ago. And this is my wall from this past season. And we are sure hoping that there's another show this year. I would invite everyone to come and visit me. If you need passes to get in, I get unlimited passes. So call me up and I'll leave passes at the door. So please do come and visit us this summer. Hopefully we'll be there. So I sell my work to a lot of different individuals for their homes, corporations for their offices. But one of the most, again, you know, a challenge is what gets me going the most. Someone came this year actually and said, we have a very large wall that we'd like to put some art on, but it's a curved wall. And we haven't been able to find anything. Could you put your art on a curved wall? And I said, sure, no problem. I've actually done it before. So I, you know, came up with several different concepts on how to put my art on a curved wall. So my solution was to put wood strips up on the wall first. And then what I did is I put sheet metal and I printed on magnetic vinyl. And so the vinyl would attach to the wall and conform to the curve by being magnetic. So here I'm putting the magnetic receptive material, which makes it's so strong. It was amazing how strong it was. I'm trimming the top edges of the magnet now so that it's nice clean edge for the print to sit on. The magnets are so strong, I had to put up paper so that when I rolled out the print, I could adjust it just a little bit, just sort of being able to adjust the print over 25 feet. That piece right there is 25 feet long. And then, you know, pulling out the paper, and there you go, you got it done. So another exhibition that I did this year, or I'm sorry, last year, was at the Active Culture Festival of Arts South Gallery. And it's in a little yogurt shop. So it's just a modest little gallery, but it was, Channel 5 News came and did a live broadcast in the morning about the gallery and my installation. So that was really fun, getting to talk to Gail Anderson. And it was sort of the big deal was that it was a 40-foot print that wrapped around 3 sides of the room. I shot this image in Maui last year. And of course, this is what I call a drive-by, where the camera's driving by from a car. I've been written up. I've had the honor to be sort of covered in several magazines. This was fabulous, being in Wired magazine. They contacted me out of the blue and asked me if I would do an interview, and they were interested in my NASCAR work. American Photo contacted me and wanted to include me in a story about 3 of the top people in this sort of industry of this weird, unique camera system of slit scan cameras. One gentleman is J. Mark Johnson. He does it digitally. And then Andrew David Hazy, who is a engineering instructor who uses this technique as an assignment for his engineering students. And he's also a photographer and was really one of the innovators and go-to people for me for information and research on the internet about this technique. His name is Andrew David Hazy, and the other guy is J. Mark Johnson, who does it with a digital system. Very different. It's similar, but a different look from what I do. Autoweek did a story about this camera system. And Chinese art photography contacted me and did an article on me as well. So this is a virtual application where I actually shot an airport with a giant white wall, and then I superimposed through Photoshop one of my images. And I just want to show this because I feel like, you know, there are airports and train stations and places where there's big, long walls would be such an amazing place for this work to live and be used for just beautification or marketing or whatever. Auto shows, this again is a virtual application. It's not real. I just put this in Photoshop. Again, a Photoshop installation, we'll call it. So for the future, what I really have for my sort of goals is to go to Africa. That's really top of my list. I want to go to Africa with my camera and try and shoot herding animals in Africa, wildebeest, zebras, elephants, giraffes. It would be so awesome to do that. So that's on my top of my list of things to do. The Olympics, what an amazing opportunity that would be to go and shoot the diving and cycling and then they could, you know, we could use them as giant murals in different venues. It's again, top of my list. And right now, what I'm working on currently is developing a line of belts. And we're excited about this because the images translate so well onto this webbing and making belts that are two-sided, so they're reversible. So you can have one belt with two images. And so you can go to my website, find out, see lots more images, find out more about me. And it's really been a pleasure today to discuss and share and explain my disc division work. And thank you very much for sticking with me. And I hope you got something out of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was riveting. I'm so excited. It looks like a lot of the work is by chance. You know, you're taking all these chances. You get one roll of film, the exposure, you have to nail the exposure and take advantage of the moment. And you're doing that. You've blended the medium of photography and the fourth dimension of time. So I found it really fascinating. I guess my first question is, I know film is a finite resource. I mean, you're photographing with expired film. Have you thought about what you're going to do when the film runs out?
Yeah, so basically I'm really careful about what I photograph. And you know, one of the things that often comes up when I'm talking about my work with people is they say, well, what would it look like if, say, you photographed an airplane? And so I use basically a filter for everything I actually shoot is how does this camera make it look unique and different than a conventional camera would make it look. So an airplane in the sky, there's no background to show the linear lines and movement. And it's just one subject. So that's not a good subject for me. A rocket, well, maybe, but not really a good subject. So I'm really careful about what I shoot. I've got about 1,000 rolls of film saved up. You know, I'm feeling pretty good about what I've got. Now, 220 film is what I like to shoot. 120 film is still available. So what I would do is I would modify my camera and it would only shoot half a length because 120 is just a shorter, you know, roll of film. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also there is the digital version, which I mean, there's guys doing that. It's a much easier way to shoot. Basically, you're just modifying an existing camera. I like things that are difficult. So I like things that basically not anyone can just go and do it. You really have to want to do it to do something like this.
All right.
Rick, I have a question here, and maybe this would create too much complexity for one camera, but you mentioned a few different shots where the subjects were moving at different speeds, and
Yeah.
some were elongated and some were shortened. I know, say like on a digital phone or like, on your iPhone or whatever, it has multiple cameras. Would there be an option of setting up like 3 cameras on one one tripod, if you will, and doing 3 different speed settings to capture everything so they would all look identical, something like that?
You could do that, but so then you'd end up with 3 separate images, and at the different distances that subject, let's say you had a group of bicycles in different lanes, or let's say cars, because that's real easy to explain. So you've got a slow lane, middle lane, fast lane. So if I use one camera to determine the distance of the near car, another camera for the far car, and another one for, then I could shoot at different speeds. But here's what I've actually done, is you change the speed of each lane of the cars. So the nearest lane, the film is going, let's say the nearest lane is going 30 miles an hour, and that distance is, say, 30 feet. The next lane over is 40 feet. Those cars need to go slower in order to be sharp. If they were going the same speed, 30 miles an hour, or actually, see, this is where it gets confusing. The further away needs to go faster in order to be sharp. So what I would do is actually have the further distances go through the frame faster, and then they would be sharp. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, actually does.
So that's what you would do, and I've actually come into that before, is that how do you get three lanes of traffic to be sharp? So that's what you would do, is you'd move the film, shoot one camera at the same speed, but change the speed of your subject.
Okay.
Yeah, and we saw how you had control with that one photo shoot at the pageant of the Masters, but
Yeah.
it's really interesting when you can't control the speed of your subject, particularly in your people watching series or the Jocelyn's.
Yeah, yeah. And the people, it's so funny when I do the people at the Festival of Arts, people are so used to stopping and looking at the camera, and I say, don't stop. If you stop, you'll be a blur. And people inevitably end up kind of stopping and looking, and it's just hard to sort of make that shift in that you have to keep moving and trying to keep the group so the gaps in between don't get too big, because I want it to be tight. Everyone needs to move. It's really a coordinated effort.
Yeah, it's kind of, you're leaving a lot of things to the angel of chance.
Yes. Well, isn't that one of the neatest things about photography? It's, I mean, I like to say that I don't take pictures, I make pictures, but you have to leave that element of chance, because that's really, whether it's a rainy day that you didn't expect and the clouds are epic, or you just have to be fluid and sort of open to those opportunities that are given to us that end up being a gift.
Yeah, well said. I would say, are you still photographing commercially, or are you completely creating your work for fine art and exploration? What is the future for you?
Yeah, I can tell you, I wish that I was just doing this fine artwork, and really the thing for me, what I've always tried to do is to find a commercial use and a commercial channel for this work, because like the people watching in cities, people holding Starbucks on their cell phone, there's Verizon, there's so many manufacturers, marketers that can use this, because it's kind of a subliminal sort of way to insert your product. So commercial applications, fine art, that's my goal. but my day job is still making films. And I love making films and videos and documentaries. And that's what really my primary work is.
All right.
Well, Rick, thank you again. Fascinating subject. I feel inspired, and I appreciate all that you've given the world, and especially us, through this lecture. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share this with
Great.
you.